Hi, we're going to read Chapter 4, Otis and the 30 Bugs. I wish I could stir up a little excitement around here, thought Otis, one day after school. His mother was busy at the Spofford School of Dance, and Miss Brewster said she didn't want him underfoot when she was trying to run the vacuum cleaner in the front hall of the apartment house. Otis didn't see how she could call him sliding down the banisters being underfoot. Well, Otis wandered over to Stewie's house to see if Stewie had any ideas. Stewie couldn't think of anything to do either. The two boys and Stewie's dog Spud started aimlessly down the street. This isn't very exciting, thought Otis, as he watched Spud stop to scratch. The dog stood on three legs while he scratched with his hind foot. That dog doesn't know how to sit down to scratch, observed Otis, hoping to get a rise out of Stewie. It takes a smart dog to stand up to scratch, boasted Stewie. Let's go over to the high school and watch football practice. Okay, agreed Otis, leapfrogging over a fire hydrant. Let's go. Suddenly Stewie pointed. Hey, look, isn't that Hack Battleson over there? It sure is, agreed Otis in an awed voice, as both boys stopped to admire Hack Battleson. Gee, thought Otis, I wish I had a piece of paper. Maybe he would give me his autograph. Hack was not only fullback and captain of the Zachary P. Taylor High School football team, he had also been chosen the most promising football player in the whole city by the sports director of the Oregon. Sometimes he called 5-yard Battleson because whenever his team needed to gain 1 yard, Hack could gain 5. Otis and Stewie often watched Hack at football practice. That was one time when Otis did not want to stir up any excitement. He just wanted to watch Hack kick the football farther than anyone else on the field and tackle the dummy so hard that the dust flew out in the clouds. Twice Stewie's father had taken the boys to see Hack play in a real game in the stadium on the other side of the city. I wonder how come he isn't out at football practice now, said Otis. Hack, who was standing on the front lawn, held a fruit jar in one hand and appeared to be looking for something. Sure is funny, agreed Stewie. What's he doing anyway? Search me, said Otis. Gee, look at those muscles. I wish I had muscles like that. Otis made up his mind to start doing exercise that very night. Otis noticed that Hack stood with one thumb hooked through the belt of his jeans, so Otis took his thumb through the belt of his jeans too. Just then the boys saw Hack leap into the air and clap the lid on the jar. He looked into the jar, shook his head, and looked around once more. The boys sat down on the curb opposite Hack's house to watch. I know what, said Otis. Let's give him a yell like we learned at the game. The boys began to yell at the top of their voices. Taylor, Taylor, Taylor. Hack paid no attention. He leaped into the air with his fruit jar again. The boys got up and walked across the street, where they stood in front of Hack's house. Let's try the Z.P. Taylor football song, whispered Otis. The boys began to sing. Z.P. Taylor, School of Honor name. Fight, 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 along the road to fame. We'll win because of might. We'll keep your victory bright. Rah, rah, rah. This time Hack glanced at the boys and the dog. Hi, kids, he said, and went on hunting. Otis and Stewie looked at each other. Hack Battleson, 5-yard Battleson, fullback and captain of the Zachary P. Taylor football team, actually had spoken to them. Encouraged, the boys moved closer. Otis was first to get up his courage. What are you doing? He asked. Trying to catch insects, answered Hack. In a way that showed he was too busy to waste time talking to grade school boys. How come you're catching bugs when there's a football practice going on? Stewie asked. I have to, said Hack. Why? Persisted Otis. Hack scowled. For biology class, we're supposed to hand in a collection of 30 insects last week, and I was too busy with football practice to catch them. Now the teacher says if I don't hand them in by tomorrow, she'll tell the principal, and I can't play on the team. Gee, said, and the big game with Benjamin Harris High is next week, said Otis. He and Stewie were shocked. To think that a teacher could not only give orders to Hack Battleson, but could make him miss football practice. Otis recovered first. I'll catch them for you, Hack, he said eagerly. It wasn't every boy who had the chance to do something for the captain of the team and the best football player in the whole city. Would you? Hack's manner toward the younger boy suddenly changed. Say, that'll be swell. Then I could go back to football practice. I'll catch them too, said Stewie. You keep out of this. It was my idea, said Otis, who did not want any help from Stewie. He wanted to tell people that he alone caught 30 insects for Hack Battleson. Why, it was practically the same thing as saving the big game for the Zachary P. Taylor High School. I thought of it at the same time, objected Stewie. You just said it first. Well, that's what counts, said Otis. Why don't you go exercise your dog or something? He doesn't need exercise, answered Stewie. Then, is it okay if I catch them for you? Otis asked Hack. He was anxious to have it clearly understood that he was the one to collect the insects. I don't care who catches them, answered Hack, who was in a hurry to get to the football field. Just so somebody has 30 insects here by 6:30. Can't be any later because I'll probably be up all night trying to identify them as it is. And they all have to be insects. You can tell an insect because it has 6 legs. Centipedes and things like that don't count. Otis was disappointed that Stewie was to have an equal chance, but he didn't feel that he could say anything to Hack about it. And they have to be in good condition, continued Hack, as he held up his fruit jar. See that piece of cotton in the jar? It's soaked in cleaning fluid, the kind that takes spots off clothes. When I catch an insect, I put it in the jar and put it on the lid on a minute. The fumes kill the insect without hurting it. Sure, I get it, said Otis. How about letting me take your jar? Hey, that's not fair, objected Stewie. That way you'd have a head start. Sure, I'd have a head start, said Otis. For Pete's sake, if you kids are going to stand there fighting all day, I'll get another jar for you, said Hack, who was really pleased to have 2 boys so anxious to work for him. Otis and Stewie glared at each other until Hack returned with a second jar. Okay, kids, see you at 6:30. Hack waved as he hurried off to the Zachary P. Taylor football field. You just wait, I'll beat you to the 30 bugs, said Stewie. Otis did not waste time answering. At least he had a head start. At home, he had 2 insects, a dead dragonfly he picked up once because he thought it was pretty, and a yellow butterfly that had died when he tried to keep it in a jar. Now he pawed through some dead leaves under a shrub until he saw an earwig. He scooped it into the jar and screwed on the lid. Stewie watched him and then did the same thing. The boys glowered at each other. Otis decided he'd better get away from Stewie or Stewie would copy all of his ideas. Otis knew he had to work fast if he was going to catch all those insects by 6:30. So long, he said, and he ran down the street. Otis stopped to hunt among some flowers in a neighbor's yard. When he found a tiny green aphis clinging to the underside of a rose leaf, he carefully scooped it off and added it to the earwig in his jar. A ladybug flitted past, but before Otis could grab it, it lit on a rosebush glowing on a trellis against the house. When Otis tried to catch the ladybug, it flew to a leaf just out of reach. Otis started to climb the trellis. The lady who lived in the house burst out onto the front porch. Otis Spofford, you come down off my climbing President Hoover this instant, she ordered. Otis was so startled that he grabbed at a thorny branch instead of the trellis. You're what? He asked, trying to untangle his t-shirt from the thorns. My climbing President Hoover, my prize rosebush. The lady was very cross. I won't have it broken. Come down at once. The ladybug flitted away, so Otis jumped to the ground. Thorns ripped his t-shirt, but he couldn't let the ladybug out of sight. "And don't you come into my garden again," said the owner of the rose bush. "I won't," promised Otis, keeping his eye on the ladybug and thinking that if he were a grown-up with a prize rose bush, he would want a boy to catch bugs in it. He jumped up and cupped his hands together. "There, I got you," he thought. That was one insect closer to winning the game. In the next yard, Otis pried a rock out of a rock garden, but all he found under it was a worm and a crawly thing with too many legs to be an insect. A fly buzzed by, and Otis wasted several precious minutes chasing it before it flew out of reach. He saw a bee hovering over a flower. Quickly he clapped it, flower and all, into his jar. Otis was about to investigate another rock when the owner of the garden appeared. She smiled at Otis. "Hello, boy, come here and let me show you all my pretty flowers," she said. It was perfectly plain to Otis that she didn't want him in her garden at all. He didn't see why grown-ups had to be so fussy about a few old flowers. "No, thank you," he said. He didn't have time to make friends with anyone, not today, anyway. The lady started across the yard toward Otis. She looked so determined to be friendly that Otis decided he'd better leave in a hurry, or he would be looking at pretty flowers whether he wanted to or not. "Well, goodbye," he said, and he ran down the street, feeling that he had a narrow escape. As Otis was passing Stewie's house, a tiny moving speck on the sidewalk caught his eye. It was an ant, and Otis lost no time in scraping it up with a twig and poking it into his jar. "That's my bug," yelped Stewie from half a block away. "You give it back to me." "It is not," Otis yelled back. "It is too. I saw you pick it up in front of my house." Stewie looked hot and cross. "It was on the sidewalk, and sidewalks don't belong to you. They belong to the city." Otis wasn't going to waste time arguing. When he reached his apartment house, he found Bucky sitting on the front steps waiting for him. "Say, Otis," said Bucky, "let's play "I know what," interrupted Otis. "Let's play like we're scientists hunting bugs in the jungle. Let's see how many bugs we can capture." Bucky was delighted to receive this much attention from Otis. "Dead or alive?" he asked. "Alive," said Otis. "We'll shut them in this jar. You go that way and I'll go this way." He found a spider in the shrubs and was about to put it in the jar when he remembered a spider has 8 legs. It was not an insect. "I've got one," shrieked Bucky. "It's like a ladybug, only yellow with black dots." He held up his 2 hands coped together. "Swell," said Otis. "Here, put it in the jar." "I can't," said Bucky. "It's a fierce jungle bug. It's putting up a terrible fight. It's trying to eat me alive. Help, help!" Bucky fell to the tiny patch of grass in front of the apartment house, where he rolled and kicked. "Oh, for Pete's sakes," Otis was disgusted. He might have known this was the way a kindergarten would behave. "I'll save you," he called, and fell to the grass beside Bucky to pry open his hands and take out the bug. "You saved my life," panted Bucky. "This is a keen game." Otis was not so sure, but at least he had another insect for Hack Battleson. Otis then caught a fly, mosquito, and a white moth. Bucky captured a beetle, a stink bug, and a grasshopper that put up a battle and spit brown juice all over Bucky's hands. "There's Stewie across the street," exclaimed Bucky. "Look, he's got a jar too." "Come on, let's go around and back," suggested Otis quickly. "Hey, Stewie," yelled Bucky. "Are you playing like you're hunting fierce bugs in the jungle too?" "Shh," hissed Otis. Too late. Stewie came across the street. He held his jar behind his back so Otis could not see how many bugs he had. He glared at Otis, who also held his jar out of sight. Then he said to Bucky, "How would you like to hunt bugs in the jungle with me for a change?" "Hey, cut it out," said Otis. "Bucky and I are having a keen time all by ourselves, aren't we, Bucky?" Bucky beamed. "We sure are," beamed. Otis stepped around Stewie to try to catch a glimpse of his jar. If only he knew how many insects Stewie had. Stewie saw what Otis was trying to do and moved a couple of feet so Otis couldn't see behind him. "I know what," said Bucky. "Let's all play like we're hunting in the jungle together." "Let's not," said Otis and Stewie together. This time Stewie tried to see behind Otis's back while Otis glared and moved away. Guess I'll be going now, said Stewie. I'm about through anyway. So long. See you at 6:30. Stewie started home. Then he called back, unless I decide to take my 30 bugs over sooner. I like Stewie, don't you? Asked Bucky. Otis did not answer. He was too busy worrying. Was Stewie telling the truth or was he bluffing? He wished he knew. Otis tried to think where Stewie might have found a lot of insects all at once. That gave him an idea. Come on, Bucky, he said. On either side of the front door of the apartment was a porch light that burned all night. Otis knew that insects were attracted to them. He boosted Bucky up to one of those lights and told him how to unscrew it. He was rewarded by a shower of dust and dead moss. Mrs. Brewster flung open the front door. She had a dish towel wrapped around her hair and a broom in her hand. Now what are you boys up to? She demanded as she began to sweep the moss off the porch. Just look at the litter on this porch. Bucky looked frightened, but Otis could not let that collection of moss be smashed to bits by the broom. I'll sweep the porch, he offered. We're just cleaning the bugs out of the light for you. I like to sweep the porch. All right, said Mrs. Brewster crossly, but see that you get it clean. Goodness knows I have enough other work to do. That was close, thought Otis, and he got on his hands and knees to examine his harvest. There was not only an assortment of moths, there were also 3 kinds of gnats as well. Of course the bugs had been cooked by the heat of the light, but Otis was sure Hack wouldn't mind because their legs and wings were all in place. He hadn't said the bugs had to be raw. The second light produced 2 more moths and several insects. Otis already had. If I were collecting just for fun, I could save them for traders, Otis thought, and picked a dead wasp out of a cobweb. Dead bugs aren't any fun, complained Bucky. They don't put up a fight. Why don't you play like you're a janitor, suggested Otis, who knew Bucky would do anything to please him. You could have lots of fun sweeping the porch for Miss Brewster. Okay, agreed Bucky. Otis continued to hunt alone. Fortunately, this was the day his mother gave a private ballet lesson after her tap dancing class, so he knew she would be late getting home. He hoped Stewie's mother would insist on taking time to eat dinner before 6:30. At 6 o'clock, Otis went into his apartment, where he emptied a box of crackers onto the drain board. Then he lined the box with cotton and arranged his insects in rows. I bet old Stewie won't think of this, he thought. He'll probably bring his all bunched up in the jar. Counting the dragonfly and butterfly, Otis had 28 insects. At 7 minutes after 6, Otis found a different kind of ant crawling on the garbage can behind the apartment house. This made 29. By a quarter after 6, Otis was frantically beating the shrugs. He saw flies, earwigs, ladybugs, insects he already had. At 25 minutes past 6, he knew he could hunt no longer. He had to take a chance on finding his last insect on the way to Hack's house. Stewie was sitting on Hack's front porch with the candy box on his knees. Spud lay at his feet. Hi, he said. Hack's late getting home, or I'd given him my 30 bugs a long time ago. Otis pretended to admire his collection so much that he did not hear. However, he was careful to close the lid of his box before he sat down beside Stewie. Just remember, I was here first, said Stewie. Otis did not say anything. Holding his box so Stewie couldn't see into it, he took out the dragonfly and held it up to admire. Hack will be glad to see this. You don't often see such a beauty, he remarked, because he was sure Stewie did not have a dragonfly. By the worried look on Stewie's face, he knew he was right. He'd probably rather have my queen bee, said Stewie. Now it was Otis's turn to look worried. Did Stewie really have a queen bee? How did he know it was a queen? Otis decided it was probably a plain old bumblebee that he just called a queen. The boys sat in uneasy silence until Hack Battleson turned the corner. Hi, Hack, they yelled, and they glared at each other. Hi, kids, answered Hack. Sorry I'm late, but I had a few things to talk over with the coach. Otis looked admiringly at Hack. Maybe someday he would have to talk over a few things with the coach. Maybe when he got to high school, the coach would remember that he was the boy who saved the big game by catching bugs, and he would have a purple sweater with a red T on it on one side and 3 red stripes on the left sleeve to show he had played on the team 3 years, just like Hack. "Here are the bugs," said Stewie, annoyed with himself for letting Stewie get ahead of him. Otis thrust his box at Hack too. "I've got some keen insects," he said. Hack sat down on the steps. He opened Stewie's box first and counted all the insects in it, while Otis waited anxiously. 30, announced Hack. "I guess that's that," thought Otis, suddenly feeling tired and hungry. He had not saved the game for Zachary P. Taylor High School after all. He had lost it by one bug, just one little old bug, and Stewie would never let him forget it either. Hack opened Otis's box. "Look at the dragonfly," he said. "That's a beauty." Otis felt a little better. At least Hack Battleson admired his dragonfly. That was something. Otis stepped over Spud and sat down on the steps while Hack counted his insects. 29, said Hack. "You're one short." "Huh," said Stewie. "So you didn't have 30 after all. You needn't rub it in," thought Otis, as his eye fell on Stewie's collection. "Hey, wait a minute," he shouted. "Neither do you. You've got a spider and they don't count. They've got 8 legs. "That's right," agreed Hack. "If they have 8 legs, they aren't insects. Let's have another look at that box." Surely Hack would have Otis's collection now because of the dragonfly. Otis waited anxiously. Spud stood on 3 legs to scratch. As Otis watched the dog, he was suddenly stunned by an idea. If only Stewie didn't think of it at the same time. Otis quickly looked over Stewie's collection. No, Stewie didn't have one. That made his idea even better. But Stewie had an idea of his own. "I know what?" Otis heard him say to Hack. "I'll pull off a couple of his legs. Then it will be a 6-legged bug." Otis parted Spud's coarse hair and began to search for something. "That wouldn't work," objected Hack to Stewie's suggestion. Otis's thumb and forefinger closed on something that he quickly popped into the jar. "I don't see why," Stewie was saying. "I bet the teacher would think it was some new kind of bug." "She's too smart for that," said Hack. "Somebody tried it already." Then Otis spoke. "Here's my 30th insect," he said, as he reached into the jar. "What is it?" asked Hack. "A flea," answered Otis. "A flea?" Hack began to laugh, but he took the tiny insect and added it to Otis's collection. Then he closed the box. "Thanks a lot," he said. "I guess I ought to get a pretty good grade on this collection, even if I am late handing it in." Stewie turned to Otis. "Where did you get that flea?" he demanded. "Off Spud," said Otis. "That's what I thought." Stewie was angry. "That was my flea. You took my flea." "Don't you wish you thought of it?" jeered Otis. "So long, Hack. Spud's fleas are my fleas, and you didn't have any right to take it," said Stewie, as Hack went into the house. "It was just plain cheating, that's what it was." "Aw, you're just mad because you weren't smart enough to think of it first," taunted Otis. "Otis Spofford, I'll," Stewie sputtered. "You'll have to catch me first," yelled Otis, and ran down the street. And as he ran, he was no longer Otis Spofford running home to dinner. He was 5-yard Spofford running 99.5 yards for a touchdown to save the big game for the Zachary P. Taylor High School.